As I said, my name's Kevin Salvidge. I'm the European Regional Development Manager for Leader, based in London in the UK. So for those of you who don't know me, hello. And on the screen currently are my contact details. So should you have any questions either during this or afterwards, please don't hesitate to contact me. So as we've been discussing, our industry, when it moves from one technology to another, typically starts off by replicating what it did before. And that's what we saw probably with the first of the IP OB trucks, studio facilities, that they simply replicated an SDI workflow. Everything was together. But we're now starting to see that there's advantages to breaking those apart. And here we can see now, in this particular example, the acquisition on the left-hand side has now been connected over a wide area network to a production center, where lots of the tools and that you're familiar with within an OB truck are actually now centrally located. Still, we have the connection to the traditional contribution and distribution circuits. At Leader, we've been looking at this and monitoring this for a while, and this has resulted in us launching the LVB440 IP Analyser. And because probably most of us are engineers, that's what the back of it looks like. So as you can see, it is a 1RU COTS-based server with 2 network ports, 200 gig ports, and dual power supply connections. And those network connections support up to 100 gig. And it's an optimized CentOS Linux 7 core. So it is a true COTS server. And what at Leader we've added onto that is the monitoring and alarm systems for all of the SMPTE 2110-20, 21, 30, 31, and 40 profiles, along with 2022-6. Because as we said, we've seen numerous customers who actually have both in their operations, especially those working over a wide area network. Also support for 2022-7, so redundant streams, and PTP version 2, so SMPTE 2059. And obviously one of the most critical now is the control and registration using the NMOS protocols that are now rapidly establishing themselves. And the great thing that the LVB440 provides is 8 concurrent analysis engines, and these are completely independent. So it means 8 users can have a completely independent view depending on their operational or production requirements, and they can analyze the network. There's low latency content analysis and monitoring of the ancillary data. So the primary tool that people use now to monitor the networks using the LVB440 is going to be the instrument view. And this gives us, to start with, a view of the streams. So we can see here that we have video, audio, and ancillary components. We can then make a more detailed analysis of the flows of one of those streams. And then we can look in detail at the timing and everything associated with SMPTE 2110-21. We can also look at packet flows. So here we have what's known as like a waterfall display, where we can see the spread of the interpacket arrival time against time. And you've got your primary and secondary streams, as it's a -7 operation. And we have indication here, in this case, that actually 100% of the packets are arriving on the secondary. So although the service is working, this is something that an engineer would probably be keen to correct, because if something does happen to the secondary, although it's protected and operating, we could be in for potential issues further down the line. Obviously, we're still moving pictures around, so we need the traditional tools that we use to analyze the color and the picture image, like the waveform display and the vector scope display as well, for color and saturation of the image. And for those used to the extended gamut displays, like the diamond pattern, those two are also available looking at -20 stream. Audio hasn't been forgotten, and features on the 440 include the ability to down mix into a stereo pair, either 7.1 or 5.1 surround audio. And as can be seen here, we can also show the phase of those audio channels and loudness monitoring over a 15-second, 30-second or 3-minute period. And finally, there's ancillary data, which obviously now is part of the -40 stream, and we can analyze and make sure that's present and correct within the service. So as I mentioned, we have a traditional kind of workflow from acquisition to production to distribution. And what we've seen over the last 2 years is a move to kind of a remote IP production center where services and operations have been removed from the OB truck and they've been placed into the remote IP production center. And now we're starting to see some of those services from the broadcast center also migrate into the remote production center. So with the LVB440, the engineer in charge has the ability to monitor everything that's going on with inside the truck, with inside the production center, and within the broadcast center. But because they're connected over a wide area network, there's nothing to stop now the engineer in the remote production center viewing what's going on in the broadcast center and the truck. So now he can start to analyze, is the issue within my facility? Is it within one of the other facilities, or is it actually part of the network connectivity that's causing me the issue? So if the engineer in the remote production center can do this, there's nothing to stop the engineer in the OB truck looking in, or the engineer in the broadcast center viewing the other way. And the 440 also allows remote connection via a web browser from a mobile device. So this means now we don't actually have to have an engineer in any of these production centers and facilities. He can monitor the 440 in the truck, in the broadcast center, and the IP production center. Maybe he's even doing it from the comfort of his own sofa, sitting at home. He's had a call, there's an issue, he dials in and starts monitoring there. And the tools that you saw from the instrument view connecting directly to the LVB440 are also available on a mobile device. So whether that's a tablet or a mobile phone. Here we're monitoring the status. Now we're looking at the network and the flows. Here we can see the 2022-7 streams, exactly as we saw before. The secondary is 100% of the data flows at the moment. The waveform monitor for the video picture, the audio, and this is where the down mix of the 7.1 and 5.1 to a stereo pair can be invaluable for checking and listening to the audio on a particular service. Again, audio loudness is capable remotely. And the monitoring of the ancillary data. So this changes the way we can look at monitoring and analyzing IP networks and production facilities. And with the 440, we've also added another tool called the widgets. And these are a low bitrate, low latency HTML5 web browser based tool, which means that you can monitor the video streams remotely. And by low latency, I mean 2 frames of video, which is now comparable to SDI video. And this is making them ideal for remote production operations. And the low bitrate gigabit network interface means multi-viewer displays can be deployed on any network device with a web browser inside or outside of a facility. So if we take a look here, back at our OB truck with its remote IP production center. And this allows us to move the camera shaders out of the truck. And this has actually been done. Here we have an image where the camera shader is monitoring 4 camera channels, and he's viewing them using the widget displays, where he's got a picture and waveform. He still has his reference monitor for viewing, but you can see the space that has now saved. There's no waveform monitor display. There's no multi-viewer display. And as I mentioned, the HTML5 browsers can then very simply be configured into a multi-viewer display. And here we have an example where it's purely an IP address that we've connected to. And this is very simple and easy to configure. And for those who want them in a rack-mounted scenario, we have a rack-mount solution. And this is with our partner Densitron. And this is a configurable display. So here we have a single image looking at camera 5. But if we needed to change that maybe to look at 4 waveforms and 4 camera images, it's very simple and easy to pull up one of the pre-configured configurations. And you're looking at the -20 streams directly. There is no conversion to SDI. You are now in a true IP world. Again, this may be a configuration of 2 larger displays that better suit your requirements. And this can also work in a master control environment where you have the traditional instrument views for monitoring and analytics of the IP network and multi-viewer displays like you would do in an SDI world. And with the 440's NMOS integration, you can use NMOS router controllers to switch sources like you'd expect to do in an SDI world. And probably the ultimate combination is to put all of these together into a studio production environment where you have both the camera racking, widget views, and the multi-viewer. So you've got your program preview output and you're able to output a studio production. So if we put all this together and we look at the network connectivity, which now does exist across Europe, there's nothing to stop us doing the following. Let's take a sports production in Lisbon. Let's put the camera shaders in Barcelona and have them racking the cameras remotely on the other side of the Iberian Peninsula. Obviously, the video replay can be connected via the network. Audio production can be connected via the network. Graphics can be connected. And production staff now can work remotely and with a multi-viewer display, view the sources that are relevant to their particular production requirements. You can have the studio, say it's in Paris. And now we're using a 440 with the widgets to rack those cameras and monitor the program and preview output in that studio. Obviously on the network, we've now got the ability to add home-based content. So celebrities, commentators and that don't need to travel. They can be locally based to comment on the sporting event or the light entertainment program. And then finally, you have your centralized distribution. And again, in the control room for that, you could well have rack-mounted displays looking directly at the -20 sources that you need to monitor prior to transmission. And then finally, you have your MCR operation, which is looking at all of the -20, -30 and -40 ancillary data. And on top of all of this, again, you can have your various execs monitoring the multi-viewer display and remotely, you've got an engineer who can be monitoring all of the LVB440s across the whole installation and tracking and making sure that everything works. So hopefully you can see that the migration to 2110 is going to be a huge enabler for all kinds of live production. And the technology now exists so that we can deploy these units remotely, monitor them remotely, and provide the quality of service that our customers expect and have come used to from an SDI production with a multi-million-dollar OB truck sitting at the venue. Are there any questions?
Hey, Kevin. I don't see any in the chat log. So if anybody has anything, please go ahead and enter that in, or you can simply unmute yourself. We don't keep everybody in the dark here necessarily.
No.
So what kind of bandwidth do people really need to be able to look at one of these things from their home environment, and how essential is it that is a reliable link?
Obviously, it's nice to have reliable. I mean, we've run this over facilities over kind of the gigabit Ethernet network. So this is not the 2110 network. This is
right
kind of the management control layer. Probably most people have that have been involved in this have got sort of quite a guaranteed kind of dedicated network connection if they're going into their home. Obviously, between facilities, it's not an issue because that's pretty much what people have, paid for as their standard connectivity.
Okay.
It's showing that it can be done. I mean, I could fire up my mobile phone now with a 5G connection, and I can connect to a device that's in Oslo, and I can start looking through it. I can even do a PCAP on a device and send it to somebody, and that's from sitting here in London on a mobile phone. So, I could be on a train traveling between venues, and somebody says, "We've done a rig, we've got an issue with cameras in Madrid. What's going on?" And this is, the traditional SDI way of test and measurement was that you had to physically connect to a BNC connector.
Right.
And you saw it was a very personal one-to-one relationship. But now, there's nothing to stop you having 4 or 5 engineers, monitoring individual bits and pieces, and then having a chief engineer that you could escalate it to if you can't resolve the issue.
Gotcha.
And it's, the first time I saw it running, we were actually it was part of the AIMS kind of pre-IBC testing, and I remember 2 guys kind of came out scratching their heads saying, "Oh, something's wrong. We can't see this stream." And one of the engineers just said, "Oh, what's the multicast address?" They said, "Oh, it's 239 ... And he just picked up his phone and said, "What's your email address?" And they said, and then one of them went, "Bing, you just sent me a PCAP." He said, "Yeah." He goes, "Was that what I was doing on the network?" "Yeah." So
cool.
That's what they were up to. So
very good, very good.
It's just completely changing the way this can be done.
Excellent, excellent. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot. I don't see any other questions rolling in. So why don't we all take a 10-minute break here, and we will pick up again with.
There's other questions.
Oh, I'm not seeing them. Were you sending them directly to Kevin? Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. How does the connection to mobile devices work Wi-Fi? Okay, so I think you covered that, or do you want to talk about that anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I've got it set up here. I mean, obviously the Wi-Fi connection is really good because, got a dedicated network. But certainly now with the advent of 5G services, it's working on 5G services, and it's like being connected to the device on a hard connection. It's very reactive. The picture refresh, well, you think you're connected. And you can see all the data flows updating, instantaneously.
All right. Another question. Have you found any problems with transmitting PTP over telco infrastructure, WAN? So PTP aware switches?
Well, obviously, as a test and measurement manufacturer, we're sort of the referee of this, that we tell it as it is.
Right.
So it's probably a bit unfair to kind of disclose any, but obviously we know wide area and PTP, can be a bit of a challenge if you're not aware of what you're doing. And again, having this capability of a device at either end that you can look at and you can say, well, it's good inside facility A, it's good inside facility B, but the signal between, you've then got to start looking in between. It's a good old fashioned, knife and forking test and measurement. You step your way through the problem till either the problem goes away or the problem appears again.
So what I'm hearing you say is that being able to recognize if there's a problem is certainly within the realm of the technology, but you don't have any specific examples of it working or not working. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, the PTP piece is the interesting, and that's obviously there's a lot of work going into that over a wide area network. We've got a lot of the timing tools on the device, part of the Dash 21, and some of the other bits already are in there so that you can look and analyze. I mean, lots of things. Probably the big difference we've found with IP networks is that as engineers, you come to understand them. There's a term you see like a network signature, how it's behaving.
Right.
You get to understand that certain ports have like a certain bandwidth of inter-packet arrival, whereas on other switches it will be different. And it's like, one's not right, one's not wrong. It's just the signature of the switch. And the great thing with the 440 is that you can set up alarms and warnings so you start to get messages before they become critical so that you can address them. Like you saw there with the Dash 7. It's working, it's protected, but I had everything coming in on the secondary stream.
Right.
Which, just my personal thing, I'd be a little bit nervous about that, because if something did happen to the secondary, there's a reason why they're all going to the secondary and it's not an even split. In an ideal world, I'd like to see it nicely balanced 50-50. But we know it's going to swing 20-80, 70-30, 60-40, because that's the way these networks behave.
Yeah. I understand. Yeah, I mean, I guess with 2022-7, if both streams are up and running perfectly, you could be bringing all your packets from one stream, even though the other one is up and running, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, just on that screen, you saw that it actually said it's protected, so it's good. The backup service is there.
Right.
But just at the moment, if you were to analyze all of the packets and they're all coming from the secondary, that's what's making up what you're seeing.
Right.
So it's giving you that indication. Why is that? I thought we'd load balance this network. I thought we'd, really done a good job. Why is it leaning to one leg, not the other?
Right. Yeah, load balancing. Okay.
That's what these tools do. They give you that visibility before problems happen. And it's a case of you understanding and looking at it and saying, that doesn't look right, but it's not taking me off air yet, or it's not affected the quality of my service. But I'm heading off somewhere I might not want to go.
If this is Steve, Kevin.
Hello, Steve.
If I could add just one note, just to make sure everybody's clear, the LVB440 lives on the actual 2110 network, and you're remoting all of the visuals of the measurements. So we don't have to remote the 2110. We don't have to remote the PTP. We're just going to remote the measurements of those devices. So that's the beautiful thing about it, is the LVB440 sits on the 2110 network. And all we're going to do is remote the data from that. So the network's not near as critical of your connection as the 2110 network itself is. So we aren't trying to take PTP across a WAN in this case.
It's kind of like watching a multi-viewer at home over a HLS connection when the real multi-viewer is 200 miles away in your production facility. You can see what's going on, but you're not trying to get every bit of every image back to your home. Yeah, that makes sense. So one last question here, I guess. What's the maximum bandwidth stream that you can do 100% PCAP with?
Whoa. That's a good question. I think I'm gonna have to take the fifth on that one and come back to you. Steve, have you tried it?
No, I have not. Yeah, I would have to go back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're bringing in multiple streams.
Yeah.
You know, on the high speed optics, but the question was, you know, how many, you know, can you handle a 4K, you know, HDR stream?
80 gig that we could actually take a PCAP, because that's the throughput.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if you can get that much into memory, but
yeah, don't know though.
We've just added a new feature which is called a rolling PCAP. So it's basically doing that, and then at the point you want to stop, depending, because you can specify the buffer size, how much you want to capture.
Right.
Yeah, so
I think what we can do is we can provide some more details on this. It's
okay. Well, darn, I usually don't get to stump the experts. That's
hey.
And it wasn't my question. We have to give props to Joe Tozer for asking that question.